Alright guys, topic of discussion today is going to be who has the cleanest Foxbody cars. If you're in the market for buying a Foxbody right now, where should you focus your time? Do you want to look at the Canadian cars, or are they all roached because they've seen winters, they've seen salty roads? Or do you want to focus on maybe the southern states and the cars that come out of there because they never saw salty roads, they never saw cold weather? So I'm going to break this all down for you. I've got some really good examples of both cars that have lived their whole lives in Canada and cars that have spent their whole lives in the southern states. We're going to compare the two and try to give you a 10,000 foot overview of where you should be focusing your time, or maybe you're just curious about how these cars have fared, and I've got some pretty good examples of that. As long as I can remember, all of my local Canadian Foxbody friends have always talked about going down to the southern states and finding themselves a clean southern Fox. Now, much of the reason behind this is the southern states are just not subject to the same harsh winter elements and or conditions that the Canadian provinces are, and therefore, in theory, you should be able to find yourself a cleaner car. Not only does much of Canada get a lot of snow in the winter, this snow, specifically on the road, is accompanied by very harsh salt, sand, gravel, and other very harsh chemicals used to keep the roads from icing up. Due to this, many of the cars in Canada suffer from premature paint wear, paint chips, sandblasted paint and or glass, gravel rash, and worst of all, rust. The salt and chemical concoctions used to keep the roads from freezing are disastrous on metal. The slightest paint chip can literally turn into a bubbled up rust spot with only one winter season of driving. For this reason, myself and most other Canadian gearheads have always had the opinion that if you want to find a super clean Foxbody, or any other older car or truck for that matter, you need to find one from the southern states. Well, I've come to the realization that I think this is very general, and it doesn't quite paint the full picture. So I'm wondering if maybe we just aren't looking at this problem from the correct angle. Right, so now I want to try to provide you with some contrast between a southern car and a Canadian car. And I've got two really good examples of both right over my right shoulder. So here, the strawberry red 1991 GT convertible. This, in my opinion, is a true blue southern car. It originally got purchased in Arkansas. From Arkansas, it went to Florida, and from Florida, it went to Texas. And that's where I bought it, is from Texas. So the car has now been with me for just under a year, and since I've got it, I've gone through trying to restore some bits and pieces of it from old age and wear and whatever. But other than being in a garage getting worked on, or a couple of last summer sunny trips for a couple hours here and there, it has not seen a winter. So everything I'm about to tell you on the car, I pretty much inherited. So as I worked on the car, I started to realize that, well, the underneath of the car was maybe not as clean as I expected a southern car to be. There is some standard surface rust. Now, obviously the car's 30 years old, 30 plus, but there's maybe a little bit more than I was expecting. Some other things I noticed was the plastic looming, specifically under the hood in the engine compartment area, has been like totally baked with heat. It disintegrates in your hands upon contact. Rubber parts. I just changed the motor mounts in it last week. I'll give you guys a link to the video up here. The motor mounts were gone. Like the rubber was totally as if someone had hit it with a blowtorch. Shot. In comparison to the 1991 convertible, I have my 92 coupe. This is a true blue Canadian car. It was bought in Canada and it's lived its whole life in Canada. The only two trips it's had to the States, I drove it. It was on nice, sunny summer conditions. Now, that car, I'm the second owner of it. I know the first owner very well, and both I and the first owner took very, very good care of it. It has never been winter driven. It was even very rarely driven in the rain. It hasn't seen rain in the last 15 years of me having it, but very well looked after. To give you a comparison, say for example, underneath the car, the underneath of my 92 coupe is a lot cleaner than my 91 convertible. Further to that, the wire looming. I replaced all of the wire looming under the hood about 4 or 5 years ago when I did a bunch of work in the engine compartment area, and the wire looming did not disintegrate in my hands. the only reason it really got changed is because it was dirty and it drove me nuts. So that's a good comparison. The motor mounts got changed on the 92 coupe as well. Those were probably a 7, maybe even an 8 out of 10 condition wise. The 91 vert, 1 out of 10 at best. So what does this all mean? As I mentioned earlier, I'm not so sure that we're looking at the situation from the correct angle. There is no doubt that Canadian winters absolutely wreak havoc on cars, regardless of make, model, or how well you look after them during those winter months. However, properly cared for Foxes that were bought brand new in Canada never ever saw the light of day during the winter months. They were tucked away in late October, early November, and never came out again until late spring when the roads were swept. The rain had already washed all the salt and chemical off the roads, and it was actually proper weather to take your car out in and not completely ruin it. So compare that to a southern car, which most likely, I'm assuming a lot here, but I think it's fair to assume this, spent 90+% of its time outside, whether it was being enjoyed and driven or it was parked, just because I think mentally we think, just leave it outside, right? Save the room in the garage, no big deal. And let's not forget that these cars weren't always as sought after as they currently are now. I mean, I think a lot of them got treated like rented mules, let's say, and just parked outside, and you parked your daily driver inside during the 90s or the early 2000s, whatever. Or maybe you had the car, family came along, and you just tucked it in the backyard. Maybe you tarped it or something, forgot about it for a bunch of years. So again, I think by default, southern cars just quite literally spent more of their lives outside. And this 91 Vert's a really good example of it, because when I got it, it was full of mud dauber nests, which are these like mud hut kind of wasp nests. They were in the rotors. They were on top of the fuel tank. It's been repainted. It was, and the story I was told is the sun had its way with it and quite literally baked the paint off of it, ruined the top, so the top was replaced too. So sun it has its own way of messing things up as well. Another interesting byproduct of a well cared for Canadian car is again the fact that we have a short driving season. For the 6 or 7 months at best that we get to enjoy our cars, the odometer reading is probably by default going to be a lot less than, say, a southern car that could, if the owner wanted to, drive it 12 months of the year. One caveat to keep in mind when having this big generalistic overview conversation surrounding Canadian cars versus American cars is that Canada is 10 times smaller from a population perspective than the United States. Canada is like 33 million people, the United States is like 330 plus million people. So just by default, Ford would have sent at least 10 times the amount of Foxbody cars back in the day to the United States than it would have to Canada, just because of the population difference. So even though I'm trying to make this point that maybe possibly Canada has a good amount of clean Foxbodies, the United States probably has 10 times that amount just because of the sheer numbers and how they break down. There was probably, if there's 10 people that kept the nice cars here, there's, well, probably 100 in the United States. So in summary, who has the cleaner Foxbodies, Canada or the US? Now, after talking my way through this and thinking quite heavily about it, I don't think that that's necessarily a fair question to ask, or at least it's not one that can really give you an answer of substance. I think the question should be reframed and asked like this. If I were looking for a super clean Foxbody, where is my time best spent, Canada or the US? And to answer that, I'm going to resort back to my earlier comment about the United States is 10 times bigger than Canada from a population perspective. Ford would have known this when they were doing production runs. 10 times the amount of Foxbodies definitely ended up in the States than that of Canada. So, that being said, I also want to make the point of saying, you never know. You might be laying there in bed one night looking for a super clean Fox on whatever classifieds marketplace app you're using, and you expand that search out to take in a little bit of Canada, and lo and behold, one of these uber clean, low mile, never driven in the winter, garage queen Fox bodies happens to pop up and you find yourself a super clean Canadian Fox. Thanks for tagging along on this one, guys. This was a real fun chat, one I've been thinking about for quite some time, and I'm actually really looking forward to chatting with you guys in the comments on this, because I'm sure there's things that I didn't even consider that you guys are going to bring up. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I think this is one of those topics that people tend to hold close to their heart and have opinions on. So bring them out. I want to hear them all. And if you know someone that you think might benefit from this video, please share it far and wide. That's why I do these videos, to get them out to the Foxbody community, maybe help someone that's currently searching for a Fox. Maybe they're considering buying one up in Canada and this advice might help them. I don't know. Anyway, thanks a lot for tagging along, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye for now.